The air in the chapel felt heavy, like a velvet curtain pressing against my chest. Stained glass windows cast fractured rainbows across my white dress, but their beauty couldn't warm the ice in my veins. I stood before the altar, my hands trembling, as I adjusted the stiff lace at my waist. The fabric scratched my skin, a reminder that this gown wasn't chosen for love but for a transaction. At 22, I, Evelyn Harper, was about to become the bride of Victor Grayson, a ruthless millionaire who'd bought me because I was untouched, a perfect prize in his cold, calculating world. I glanced at the pews, where my mother, Margaret, sat alone. Her face, lined with 50 years of struggle, was half hidden by a worn handkerchief she pressed to her eyes. She'd begged me to do this, to save our family from the debts that had swallowed us whole. "You're our only hope, Evelyn," she'd whispered last night, her voice breaking. I'd wanted to scream, to run, but the weight of her desperation had chained me here. Now, as the organ's mournful notes filled the air, I hated her for it. I hated Victor. Most of all, I hated myself for not being strong enough to say no. Victor stood across from me, tall and imposing in a tailored black suit. His dark hair was slicked back, his jaw sharp as a blade. At 32, he exuded power, the kind that silenced rooms and bent wills. His gray eyes locked onto mine, unreadable, like a storm waiting to break. He didn't smile, didn't offer a word of comfort. This wasn't a wedding. It was a contract signed in silence, sealed with my virginity and his money. The priest's voice droned on, but I barely heard him. My fingers fumbled with the dress again, smoothing a crease that didn't exist. It was a nervous habit, a futile attempt to control something, anything, in this moment that wasn't mine. I remembered standing before the mirror this morning, staring at the stranger in white. The dress was exquisite, chosen by Victor's staff, not me. It clung to my frame, elegant but foreign, like a costume for a role I didn't want to play. I'd traced the lace with my fingertips, feeling the roughness against my skin, and whispered to myself, "This is just a deal. It's not your life." But it felt like my life. It felt like the end of it. Do you, Evelyn Harper, take Victor Grayson to be your lawfully wedded husband? The priest's words snapped me back to the present. My throat tightened, a lump of defiance and fear lodged there. I wanted to say no, to tear off this dress and run until the world forgot me. But I saw my mother's hunched shoulders, the way her hands clutched that handkerchief as if it could hold her together. I saw the foreclosure notices, the empty pantry, the years of her working double shifts to keep us afloat after my father left. She'd given everything for me. How could I abandon her now? "I do," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The words tasted like ash, but they were out, binding me to a man I despised. Victor's gaze didn't waver. "You're mine from this moment," he said, low enough that only I could hear. His voice was smooth, commanding, with an edge that sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't a vow of love. It was a declaration of ownership. I lifted my chin, meeting his eyes. "You bought my vow," I replied, my tone sharp despite the tremor in my chest. "Not my heart." For a fleeting second, something flickered in his expression, surprise maybe, or amusement. But it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by that impenetrable mask. He took my hand, his grip firm but not cruel, and slid a diamond ring onto my finger. It was heavy, cold, a shackle disguised as a jewel. The priest pronounced us husband and wife, and the organ swelled, but there was no applause, no joy. Just the echo of my own heartbeat, loud and unsteady. We turned to face the empty pews, empty except for my mother. She stood, her handkerchief crumpled in her fist, and forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I wanted to run to her, to demand why she'd let this happen. But my feet stayed rooted. Victor's hand rested lightly on my back, guiding me down the aisle. His touch was a reminder. I belonged to him now, whether I liked it or not. Outside, a sleek black car waited, its engine purring softly. The driver opened the door, and I slid inside, the leather cool against my skin. Victor followed, his presence filling the space like a storm cloud. As the car pulled away, I stared out the window, watching the chapel shrink in the distance. My mother stood at the steps, alone, her figure blurred by the glass and my unshed tears. "Why me?" I asked suddenly, my voice cutting through the silence. I turned to Victor, searching his face for answers. "You could have had anyone. Why me?" He leaned back, studying me with that unnerving calm. "Because you're pure," he said simply, as if it explained everything. Untouched, unbroken, I wanted something no one else could claim. His words hit like a slap. I wasn't a person to him. I was a trophy, a symbol of his control. My hands clenched in my lap, nails digging into my palms. "You think purity is something you can buy?" I spat. "You don't know me." "I will," he said, his voice low, almost a promise. "In time." I turned away, my chest tight with anger and fear. This was my life now, a gilded cage built by his money and my mother's desperation. But as the city lights blurred past, I made a silent vow of my own. Victor Grayson might own my hand, but he'd never have my soul. I'd find a way to survive this, to protect what was left of me. For my mother, for myself. The chandelier in Victor's mansion glittered like a constellation trapped in glass, its light spilling across the marble floors. I stood in the kitchen, a cavernous space of stainless steel and silence, clutching a mug of coffee I'd brewed just to keep my hands busy. The aroma was sharp, grounding, but it couldn't chase away the chill that had settled into my bones since the wedding. 3 days had passed, and I was still a stranger here, a prisoner in a palace built by a man who thought he owned me. Victor's home was a fortress of wealth. Towering ceilings, velvet drapes, a grandfather clock ticking relentlessly in the hall. It was beautiful, yes, but it felt like a cage, every corner polished to reflect his control. He'd given me a room of my own, a grand suite with a 4-poster bed and a view of the city skyline, but I hadn't slept there yet. The sheets were too crisp, the silence too loud. Instead, I wandered, a ghost in my own life, avoiding the man who'd bought me with a check and a vow. He was in the study now, I knew that much. I'd seen him through the crack of the door earlier, hunched over papers, his jaw tight. He hadn't spoken to me since the car ride, hadn't touched me beyond that brief moment at the altar. He just watched, his gray eyes tracking me like a predator sizing up prey. I hated it, the way he seemed to see through me, waiting for something I didn't understand. The coffee maker hissed, pulling me back. I poured the dark liquid into the mug, my hands steadying as I focused on the task. It was a small act, mundane, but it felt like defiance, a piece of myself I could still claim. I carried the mug to the living room, setting it on a glass table that probably cost more than my mother's house. The clock struck 10, its chime echoing through the emptiness. That's when the phone rang. I hesitated, then picked it up from the side table. My mother's voice crackled through the line, soft and broken. "Evelyn, are you okay?" I sank onto the sofa, the leather cool against my legs. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice flat. "How are you?" She sighed, a sound heavy with years of weariness. "I'm managing. The bank called today. They're backing off, thanks to him. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, sweetheart. I never wanted this for you." Her words twisted something inside me, a knot of anger and guilt. I pictured her in our old kitchen, her hands trembling as she clutched the phone, her graying hair pulled back in a messy bun. She'd fought so hard after my father left. Double shifts at the diner, late nights sewing to make ends meet. He'd walked out when I was 10, chasing some dream of success that never came, leaving us with nothing but debt and silence. Now she'd sold me to fix his mess, and I couldn't forgive her for it. "You didn't want this, but you let it happen," I said, sharper than I meant. "You handed me over like I was a bargaining chip." "Evelyn, please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You're my hope, my everything. I couldn't lose you to the streets." I closed my eyes, fighting the tears that burned behind them. "I don't want to be anyone's hope," I said. "I just want to be me." She didn't reply, and the silence stretched until I heard a faint sob. I hung up, my chest tight, the mug forgotten on the table. That's when I felt it, his presence. I turned, and there he was, standing in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the chandelier's glow. Victor's suit was impeccable, but his eyes were different tonight, softer somehow, lingering on me longer than usual. "You made coffee," he said, his voice low, almost curious. It wasn't a question, just an observation, but it caught me off guard. I nodded, unsure why it mattered. "It's something to do." He stepped closer, his shoes silent on the marble. I braced myself, expecting a command, but he just picked up the mug, studying it like it held some secret. "You don't have to wander like this," he said. "This is your home now." "It's your home," I shot back, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "I'm just the thing you bought to fill it." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He set the mug down, his fingers brushing the handle, and for a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in his face. Regret, maybe, or doubt. But then he straightened, the mask slipping back into place. "You'll get used to it," he said, turning away. "You don't have a choice." I watched him go, his broad shoulders disappearing down the hall. The clock ticked on, relentless, marking time I didn't want to count. I picked up the mug again, the coffee still warm, and took a sip. It was bitter, too strong, but I drank it anyway. It was mine, something I'd made in this house of his. A small victory, but it was enough to keep me going. That night, I didn't sleep in the suite. I curled up on the sofa, the leather creaking, beneath me, and stared at the chandelier until my eyes burned. My mother's words echoed in my head, tangled with Victor's quiet stare. I didn't know what he wanted from me beyond the purity he'd paid for, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't let him break me. Not him, not her, not this gilded cage. I'd find a way to hold on to myself, even if it was just through a cup of coffee in the dark. The study smelled of old leather and ink, a sanctuary of dark wood and towering bookshelves that seemed to swallow the light. I stood in the doorway, clutching a steaming mug of water, hot enough to burn if I threw it, steady enough to keep me grounded. Victor sat behind his desk, a fortress of papers and power, his gray eyes fixed on a ledger. The lamp cast harsh shadows across his face, sharpening the lines of his jaw. He hadn't noticed me yet, or maybe he had and didn't care. Either way, I was done being invisible. I stepped inside, the floorboards creaking under my bare feet. "Why me?" I asked, my voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "You owe me an answer." He looked up, slow and deliberate, his pen pausing mid-stroke. For a moment, he said nothing, just studied me with that unnerving calm I'd come to hate. Then he leaned back, steepling his fingers. "You're here because I chose you," he said, his tone flat, as if that settled it. "That's not an answer," I snapped, my grip tightening on the mug. The heat seeped into my palms, a small pain I welcomed. You could have picked anyone, some heiress, some model. Why a nobody like me? Victor's lips twitched, not quite a smile. You're not a nobody, Evelyn. You're pure, untouched. That's worth more than any heiress's name. His words landed like a punch, stripping me bare. I wasn't a person to him. I was a concept, a trophy to hang on his wall. My chest burned with anger, but I kept my voice steady. You think purity is something you can buy? That it makes me yours? You don't know me. He stood, his chair, scraping against the floor, and crossed the room in 3 long strides. He stopped inches from me, close enough that I could smell the faint cedar of his cologne. I don't need to know you, he said, his voice low, controlled. I need you here. That's enough. I glared up at him, refusing to step back. I'm not here to fix your ego, Victor. I'm not some doll you can dress up and parade around. Tell me why, really why, or I'll walk out that door and let the world know what you did. His eyes darkened, a storm brewing behind them. For a second I thought he'd grab me, force me to stay. But he turned away, his shoulders stiff, and walked to the window. The city sprawled below, a sea of lights against the night. You want the truth? He said, his voice quieter now, almost raw. I was born nothing. My mother left me on a doorstep because we were poor, too poor to matter. I clawed my way up, built this empire, but it's never enough. People still leave. Money doesn't stop that. I froze, the mug trembling in my hands. His words echoed my father's absence, the way he'd chased success and abandoned us. I didn't want to feel it, this thread of understanding. But it was there, tugging at me. So you bought me to prove you could keep someone? I asked, my voice softer, sharper. That's not a reason. That's a sickness. He spun around, his face tight with something I couldn't name. Anger, shame, maybe both. Call it what you want, he said, his hands clenching at his sides. I don't need your love, Evelyn. I need you here, where I can see you, where you can't walk away. That's what I paid for. I laughed, a bitter sound that surprised even me. You're delusional. You can't buy loyalty. You can't buy me, not the real me. I'm not your mother, and I'm not here to heal your past. His shoulders sagged, just for a heartbeat, before he straightened again. You're right, he said, his voice cold once more. You're not her, but you're mine all the same. I wanted to scream, to hurl the mug at him and watch it shatter against that perfect desk. But I didn't. I set it down instead, the clink of porcelain loud in the silence, and stared at him. I'm not here to fix you, I said, each word deliberate. I'm here because my mother begged me to save her. That's the only reason. Don't fool yourself into thinking it's more. He didn't move, didn't blink, but I saw it. A flicker in his eyes, a crack in the mask. Regret? Pain? I couldn't tell, and I didn't care. I turned to leave, my bare feet silent now, but his voice stopped me at the door. You think you're so different from me? He said, low and rough. But we're both fighting ghosts, Evelyn. You'll see that soon enough. I didn't look back. I walked out, the mug still steaming on his desk, a small rebellion I'd left behind. Back in the living room, I sank onto the sofa, the leather cool against my skin. The grandfather clock ticked on, relentless, counting seconds I couldn't escape. His words gnawed at me. Ghosts. My father's ghost, abandoning us for a dream. My mother's ghost, trading me for survival. And now Victor's, haunting him with a mother who'd walked away. I didn't want to see myself in him. I didn't want to feel the weight of his pain alongside mine. But as I sat there, the chandelier's light dancing above me. I couldn't shake it. The sense that we were mirrors, reflecting wounds we couldn't name. I hugged my knees to my chest, the silence pressing in, and wondered how long I could keep fighting before those ghosts caught up to me. The air in the wine cellar was thick with the scent of oak and dust, a cool refuge beneath the mansion's polished surface. I'd slipped down here after dinner, my hands trembling as I pried open a bottle of red from Victor's endless racks. The cork popped free with a soft thud, and I poured a glass, the liquid dark as blood against the dim glow of a hanging lamp. I didn't even like wine, too bitter, too rich, but I needed something to steady me after last night's fight. Victor's words still echoed in my head. We're both fighting ghosts. I hated how they clung to me, how they made me question everything. The cellar was a maze of shelves, each bottle a silent witness to his wealth. I wandered deeper, the glass cold in my hand, until my foot caught on a loose floorboard. It creaked, shifting under my weight, and curiosity pulled me down. I set the wine aside and pried the board up, revealing a small metal box tucked beneath. My heart thudded as I lifted it, the lid rusted but yielding with a scrape. Inside were letters, dozens of them, yellowed and creased, tied with a faded ribbon. I untied the knot, my fingers clumsy, and unfolded the first one. The handwriting was Victor's, sharp, precise but unsteady in places. Dear Mother, it began. I made it today. $1 million. You'd laugh if you saw me now, wouldn't you? But you're not here. My breath caught. I flipped to another. Dated years later. I saw you in the crowd at the gala last night. You didn't look at me. I wanted to run to you, but I didn't. I'm still the boy you left. The words blurred as I read on. Each letter a plea, a confession, a wound he'd never healed. He'd written them but never sent them, a secret hoard of pain. The twist hit me like a slap. One letter, near the bottom, was different. You came back, it read. 10 years ago, you stood at my door, begging forgiveness. I turned you away. I thought it made me strong. Now I know it made me empty. My stomach twisted. His mother had returned, and he'd rejected her. All this time, I'd thought he was just a cold bastard chasing control, but he was a man haunted by a choice he couldn't undo. Footsteps echoed above, sharp and deliberate. I shoved the letters back into the box, but it was too late. Victor appeared at the cellar stairs, his silhouette stark against the light. His eyes narrowed as they landed on the box, then flicked to me. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice a low growl. I stood, the glass of wine trembling in my hand. "I found these," I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "Your letters." To her, he descended the steps, his face tightening with every stride. "You had no right," he said, snatching the box from the floor. He tore the top letter free, ripping it in half with a sound that echoed like a gunshot. "These aren't yours to touch." I didn't flinch. "You bought me to replace her, didn't you?" I asked, the question spilling out before I could stop it. "You couldn't keep her, so you paid for me instead. Is that it?" His hands froze, the torn paper fluttering to the ground. For a moment, he didn't move, didn't breathe. Then he looked at me, his eyes raw, red at the edges. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said. But his voice cracked, betraying him. "Don't I?" I stepped closer, the wine sloshing in my glass. "You wrote to her for years, Victor. You begged her to stay, and when she came back, you pushed her away. Now you're doing the same to me, buying me, keeping me, but never letting me in. Why?" He turned away, his shoulders hunching as if my words were blows. "I didn't buy you to replace her," he said, so quiet I almost missed it. I bought you because I can't lose anyone else. I won't. I laughed, a harsh, broken sound. You can't lose what you never had. I'm not hers to give back, and I'm not yours to keep. You're not saving me. You're trapping me. He spun around, his face a mask of fury and something deeper. Grief, maybe. You think you're trapped? He said, his voice rising. You're free to hate me, to fight me, to run if you want. But I'll keep you here, Evelyn, because I can't... He stopped, his hands clenching into fists. I can't watch someone else walk away. I stared at him, the glass slipping in my grip. I wanted to hate him, to see him as the monster who'd caged me. But those letters, that crack in his voice, they painted a man broken by loss, not just greed. I set the wine down on a shelf, the clink loud in the silence. You can't buy back what's gone, I said, my voice softer now. And you can't make me stay with money or guilt. He didn't answer, just stood there, the torn letter at his feet. I walked past him, my shoulder brushing his, and climbed the stairs. Back in the living room, I sank onto the sofa, the chandelier's light, flickering above me. My hands still smelled of wine and dust, a reminder of what I'd found. I didn't want to feel sorry for him. I didn't. But those letters lingered, whispering truths I couldn't unhear. I thought of my mother, her pleas, her sacrifices. Had she ever tried to reach my father after he left? Had he turned her away? Too? Victor and I, we were tangled in the same mess. Ghosts of parents who'd failed us, choices we couldn't escape. I curled up, the leather creaking beneath me, and wondered if fighting him meant fighting myself. Rain hammered the car's roof, a relentless drumbeat that matched the chaos in my chest. I sat in the back seat, my breath fogging the window as I wiped at the glass with my sleeve. The city blurred outside, streaks of neon and shadow, but I barely saw it. My hands shook, not from the cold, but from the phone call I'd just ended. A man's voice, smooth and venomous, had slithered through the line. Leave Victor Grayson, or I'll tell the world your family's dirty little secrets. The press will eat it up. Poor little bride, sold to save a sinking ship. Hung up, my heart pounding, but his threat clung to me like damp clothes. I'd slipped out of the mansion after midnight, Victor's driver too loyal to question me. The car idled now on a deserted street, rain pooling in the gutters. I didn't know where I was going, away, anywhere. But I couldn't stay in that gilded cage, not after the letters, not after his confession. I can't lose anyone else. His words had cracked something in me, but this call shattered it. Someone out there knew my shame, my sale, and they'd weaponize it against us both. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the rearview mirror. I caught my reflection, pale, wide-eyed, a stranger in my own skin. The driver's voice broke through the storm. Mrs. Grayson, we should head back. It's not safe. No, I said, my voice sharper than I meant. Just drive. He nodded, silent, and the car lurched forward. I wiped the window again, the glass cold against my knuckles, and tried to breathe. Who was this man? How did he know? My mother's debts, my father's abandonment. Those were private wounds, not headlines. But the threat felt real, a noose tightening around my neck. Headlights flashed behind us, too close, too fast. The driver cursed under his breath, accelerating, but the other car kept pace. My stomach dropped. What's happening? I asked, twisting to look back. Before he could answer, the pursuing car swerved, cutting us off. Tires screeched, and we jolted to a stop. The driver reached for his phone, but the door beside me flew open, rain pouring in. Victor stood there, soaked to the bone, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. His gray eyes blazed, wilder than I'd ever seen. "Get out," he barked, his voice cutting through the storm. I froze, rain dripping onto my lap. "What are you—" "Now, Evelyn." He grabbed my arm, pulling me into the downpour. The driver shouted something, but Victor slammed the door, his grip firm as he dragged me toward his car. A sleek black beast parked crookedly ahead. I stumbled, my shoes slipping on wet pavement, but he didn't slow. "You're not running," he said, his breath ragged. "Not from me." I yanked free, rain stinging my face. "I'm not your prisoner," I shouted, my voice swallowed by thunder. Someone called, threatened me, threatened us. "I can't stay with you." He turned, his chest heaving, water streaming down his face. "Who?" he demanded, stepping closer. "What did they say?" I hugged myself, shivering. "They'll tell the world. About the money, the marriage. They'll ruin us." My voice broke. "I won't be your liability, Victor. I'm done." He stared at me, rain pooling in the hollows of his cheeks. Then he laughed, a harsh, jagged sound that made me flinch. "You think this is about you?" he said, his tone bitter. "That call was from Richard Hale, my old partner. He's been after me for years, wants to tear me down. You're just the leverage." I blinked, the name a blank slate. "Then, why—" "Because I didn't buy you for your purity," he cut in, his voice dropping low, urgent. "Not just that. Hale threatened your family months ago. Said he'd destroy you all if I didn't pay him off. I refused. So I paid your mother's debts instead. Took you in, kept you close. To protect you." The world tilted. I stepped back, rain blurring my vision. "Protect me?" I echoed, my voice trembling. "You bought me, forced me into this, to keep me safe." "Yes," he said, his eyes locked on mine. "And I'd do it again. I won't let him touch you." Thunder rumbled, shaking the ground. I wanted to scream, to call him a liar, but his face, raw, unguarded, stopped me. This wasn't the cold millionaire from the chapel. This was a man who'd built a wall of money and pride to shield something he couldn't admit. "You should have told me," I said, my voice cracking. "I deserved to know." "I didn't want you to stay out of fear," he said, softer now, rain dripping from his lashes. "I wanted you to choose." "Choose?" I laughed, a broken sound. "You took that from me the day you paid for me." He flinched, just barely, but I saw it. "Then go," he said, stepping back, his hands falling to his sides. "Run. I won't stop you." I stood there, rain soaking through my clothes, my heart a tangled mess. I could leave, flag a cab, disappear, let Hale spill his poison. But where would I go? Back to my mother, drowning in guilt. Out into a world that didn't care. I looked at Victor, his suit clinging to him, his eyes pleading despite his words. He'd bought me, yes, but not just for himself. For me. For her. "I'm not running," I said, my voice steady despite the storm. "Not yet." He nodded, a flicker of relief crossing his face. "Get in the car," he said, gentler now. I did, sliding into the passenger seat, the leather slick under me. He climbed in beside me, starting the engine, and we drove back in silence, rain lashing the windshield. I wiped the fogged glass again, my fingers trembling, and wondered what I'd just chosen. Not freedom, not captivity, but something in between. Something I couldn't yet name. The chandelier's light felt dimmer tonight, its glow muted by the weight of the air in Victor's living room. I sat on the sofa, my hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had gone cold an hour ago. The steam had long faded, but I clung to it anyway, the porcelain a small anchor in the storm that had broken over us. The morning headlines screamed from the coffee table. Grayson Empire crumbles. Millionaire's bride a pawn in debt scandal. Richard Hale had made good on his threat, and the world now knew. My family's ruin, my sale, Victor's desperation. It was all there in black and white. A public execution of our pride. Victor stood by the window, his back to me, his silhouette rigid against the gray dawn. He hadn't spoken since the papers hit the stands, hadn't moved from that spot for hours. The silence between us was a chasm, wider than the rain-soaked night when he'd pulled me back. I'd stayed then, not out of love or duty, but because running felt like surrender. Now, I wasn't sure what held me here. Anger, guilt, or something deeper I couldn't name. The phone rang, shattering the quiet. I flinched, tea sloshing onto my fingers, but Victor didn't turn. I set the mug down and answered, my voice hoarse. "Hello? Evelyn, it's me." My mother's voice trembled through the line, fragile as cracked glass. "I saw the news. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. This is my fault." I closed my eyes, the cold tea sticky on my skin. "It's not just you," I said, though the words felt hollow. "Hale did this. He wanted to hurt Victor. But I pushed you into it," she said, her breath hitching. "I thought I was saving us, but there's more. Something I never told you. Your father, he worked for Hale years ago, took bribes, cooked books, anything to climb higher. When he left, it wasn't just for a dream. It was to cover his tracks. Hale's been holding it over me ever since, threatening to expose him unless I paid." The room spun. I gripped the phone, my nails digging into my palm. "What?" I whispered. "You knew this whole time?" "I didn't want you to hate him more," she said, sobbing now. "Or me. I thought Victor's money would bury it. I was wrong." I hung up, the click loud in my ears. My father, a crook, not just a coward, Hale's puppet, and my mother, complicit in her silence. I stood, the mug forgotten, and crossed to Victor. "Did you know?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "About my father and Hale?" He turned, his face pale, shadows bruising his eyes. "Not until last night," he said, his tone flat. "Hale called after you left the car, bragged about it, said he'd ruin me through you. I didn't tell you because..." He trailed off, his jaw tightening. "Because you didn't trust me," I finished, bitter. "You never do." He stepped closer, his hands clenched. "I didn't want you to run again," he said, his voice low, urgent. "Not when I could still fix this." "Fix it?" I laughed, a jagged sound. "The world knows, Victor. Your empire's bleeding. My family's a punchline. There's no fixing this." He moved to his desk, pulling a folder from a drawer. With a swift, angry motion, he tore it in half. The contract, the one that bound me to him. The pieces fluttered to the floor like ash. "You're free," he said, his eyes locked on mine. "I won't let your honor bleed for mine. Go." Stared at the shredded paper, my breath catching. Freedom, offered now, when it felt like a hollow prize. I could walk out, leave him to the wolves, let my mother face her ghosts alone. But my feet didn't move. I saw the headlines again, the sneering words, and something shifted inside me. This wasn't just his fight, it was mine too. My father's sins, my mother's choices, my own silence. They'd all led here. "No," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "I'm not leaving." Victor blinked. surprise breaking through his mask. "Why?" he asked. Almost a whisper. I crossed to the sofa, picking up a throw blanket and draping it over his shoulders. He flinched at the touch, but I didn't pull back. "Because running doesn't erase this," I said, wiping the cold tea from my hands onto my jeans. "You're a mess, Victor, but so am I. We're in this now, together." He didn't speak, just watched me, the blanket slipping slightly. I sat beside him, close enough to feel his warmth, and took his hand. It was rough, trembling, not the iron grip I'd expected. "Hale wants us broken," I said. "Let him try. I'm not my father, and you're not your mother." His fingers tightened around mine, a silent anchor. Hours later, when the press, vans swarmed outside, I stayed by his side, brewing more tea we didn't drink, wiping his brow when sweat beaded from the stress. The scandal raged, but in that moment, I chose. Not out of fear or force, but something fiercer. Honor, maybe, or the stubborn will to stand when everything else fell. My mother's confession replayed in my mind, a wound reopened. She'd hidden the truth, just as Victor had, but I couldn't hate her. Not fully. We were all pawns in someone else's game, scrambling to protect what mattered. I looked at Victor, his face drawn but resolute, and saw a mirror. Two people, fighting ghosts, clinging to what they could salvage. The cost of honor was steep, but I'd pay it. Not for him alone, but for the family I still had left to save. The hospital room was a sterile cocoon of white walls and beeping machines. The antiseptic smell sharp in my nose. I sat beside Victor's bed, my hand woven into his skin clammy against mine. Tubes snaked from his arm, a fragile lifeline after the attack that had left him here. His chest rose and fell, slow and uneven, a rhythm I clung to as the clock on the wall ticked past midnight. The blanket I'd draped over him hours ago had slipped, so I pulled it up, my fingers brushing his shoulder. He didn't stir, lost in a coma that felt like a betrayal after everything we'd faced. It had happened so fast. Hale's men, thugs in dark coats, had ambushed us outside the mansion, hours after the scandal broke. Victor had shoved me behind. Him, taking the knife meant for me. I'd screamed as he fell, blood pooling on the pavement, his eyes fierce even as they dimmed. "Stay back," he'd rasped before collapsing. Now, here I was, keeping vigil, my jeans still stained with his blood, my heart a tangle of fear and something softer I couldn't name. I leaned forward, adjusting his pillow, my hands trembling, from exhaustion. "I'm not leaving you," I whispered, my voice breaking the silence. "Not like this. You don't get to run out on me after all that." The words felt foolish, spoken to a man who couldn't hear, but I needed them out. I'd stayed with him through the press storm, through my mother's confession. Now I'd stay through this. Not because he'd bought me, but because he'd bled for me. The door creaked open, and I turned, my breath catching. My mother stood there, her coat damp from the rain outside, her face pale and crumpled. She clutched a small bag, her knuckles white. "Evelyn," she said, her voice a fragile thread. "I came as soon as I heard." I stood, my hand slipping from Victor's, and faced her. "You shouldn't be here," I said, sharper than I meant. "Not now." She flinched, but stepped closer, setting the bag on a chair. "I had to see you," she said, her eyes red-rimmed. "I've been wrong. About so much. Your father, the debts, pushing you into this. I thought I was protecting you, but I was drowning you. I'm so sorry." Her words hit like a wave, dragging up the hurt I'd buried. I thought of her call, her secret about my father's crimes with Hale, how she'd let me carry the weight of her silence. "You sold me," I said, my voice trembling. To fix your mistakes. And now he's here because of it. She sobbed, a raw, broken sound, and reached for me. I stepped back, but she pressed on, her hands shaking. I know, she said. I know I failed you. But I'm here now, Evelyn. I won't run anymore. I stared at her. The woman who'd raised me alone, who'd stitched my clothes and worked her fingers raw. She'd made me a pawn, yes, but she'd also been one. Trapped by my father's shadow, by Hale's threats. I saw Victor in her then, both of them fighting ghosts they couldn't outrun. My throat tightened, and before I knew it, I was in her arms, her coat damp against my cheek. We cried together, a quiet, messy release, the machines beeping behind us. I forgive you, I whispered, the words heavy but true. But we have to fix this. Together. She nodded, pulling back, to wipe her eyes. I brought you clothes, she said, gesturing to the bag. You've been here all night. Let me help. I managed a small smile, the first in days, and took the bag. Inside was a sweater, soft and worn, mine from home. I changed in the corner, peeling off the blood-streaked shirt, the familiar fabric a comfort against my skin. When I returned, she was smoothing Victor's blanket, her hands gentle. He saved you, she said, not looking up. I owe him that. He saved us, I corrected, sitting beside her. In his own messed-up way. We stayed like that, side by side, watching him breathe. I took his hand again, tracing the calluses on his palm, and thought of the letters. His mother, his regret. He'd turned her away, built walls of money and pride. But he hadn't let me go. Not in the rain, not under the knife. I leaned close, my lips near his ear. I don't need you perfect, I said, my voice steady now. I need you to wake up. We've got ghosts to bury. The door opened again, a nurse this time checking charts. She nodded at me, a silent permission to stay. My mother squeezed my shoulder, then stepped out to call the lawyer, something about fighting Hale's lies. Alone with Victor, I changed his blanket for a fresh one from the closet, folding it over him with care. It was a small thing, mundane, but it felt like a promise. I'd chosen him. Not the millionaire, not the savior, but the man who'd fallen for me. As dawn crept through the blinds, I rested my head on the bed, his hand still in mine. Forgiveness wasn't easy. It was fragile, jagged. But it was ours. My mother's, Victor's, mine. We'd been pawns, yes, but now we were players, fighting for something real. I closed my eyes, the machines a steady hum, and held on, knowing. Redemption wasn't a gift. It was a battle we'd win together. The chapel glowed in the late afternoon, its stained glass windows catching the golden hues of a sinking sun. I stood at the altar again, but this time I held a small bouquet of daisies. Simple, unpretentious, picked from the hospital courtyard that morning. My sweater hung loose over jeans, a far cry from the stiff white gown of weeks ago. Victor sat before me in a wheelchair, his face pale but alive, his gray eyes soft as they met mine. The tubes were gone, the bandages hidden beneath a dark shirt, but he was still fragile. A man pulled back from the edge by sheer will and a surgeon's skill. I'd spent days at his bedside, watching him fight through the coma, my mother at my side. She'd brought soup once, a thermos of broth she'd made herself, and we'd shared it in silence, a quiet truce. Victor woke yesterday, his first word a raspy, Evelyn. And I'd cried then, relief flooding me like rain. Now, here we were, in this small sanctuary, not for a contract, but for something real. My choice, not his money. The priest, a different one, kinder, smiled as he began. "We're here to renew a bond," he said, his voice warm. "Not of obligation, but of heart." I glanced at my mother in the front pew, her hands folded, her eyes bright with tears. She'd insisted on coming, her coat swapped for a simple dress, a sign of the woman she was rebuilding. I nodded at her, a silent "thank you," before turning back to Victor. "Do you, Evelyn Harper Grayson, take this man again?" the priest asked, his tone gentle. I looked at Victor, his hands resting on the wheelchair's arms, trembling slightly. He'd saved me, bled for me, and I'd saved him, holding on when the world tried to tear us apart. "I do," I said, my voice clear, steady. "Not because you bought me, Victor, but because I choose you. Today, tomorrow, whatever comes." His lips curved, a faint smile breaking through the exhaustion. "And I, Victor Grayson, take you, Evelyn," he said, his voice rough but firm. "Not as a prize, but as my equal, my everything." His eyes glistened, and I saw it then. A tear, the first I'd ever seen from him. It rolled down his cheek, and he didn't wipe it away. The priest stepped back, letting us have the moment. I knelt beside him, setting the daisies in his lap, their white petals stark against his dark shirt. "I don't deserve you," he whispered, his hand finding mine. I squeezed his fingers, warm now, alive. "We deserve each other," I said, my voice low, fierce. "The good, the bad, the ghosts. We've earned this." He nodded, his grip tightening, and I stood, helping him adjust the blanket over his knees. It was a small thing, folding the edges just so, but it felt right, a quiet act of care after all the chaos. The priest murmured a blessing, and we turned to face my mother, the only witness to this second vow. She rose, crossing to us, and hugged me first, her arms strong despite the years. "I'm proud of you," she said, her voice thick. "Both of you." Victor reached out, and she took his hand, a bridge mended in that touch. "Thank you, Margaret," he said, his tone soft. "For her." She smiled, a real one this time, and stepped back. I pushed Victor's chair down the aisle, the wheels humming against the wood, the daisies bouncing slightly. Outside, the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet grass from last night's rain. I stopped at the steps, breathing it in, feeling the weight of the past lift just enough to let me stand taller. "We're a family now," I said, looking down at him. "Not perfect, but ours." He tilted his head, studying me. "What happens next?" he asked, a rare uncertainty in his voice. I shrugged, a small laugh escaping me. "I don't know. We rebuild, I guess. The company, us, whatever's left. We figure it out as we go." He nodded, his hand brushing mine on the chair's handle. "Together?" "Together," I agreed, my heart steady for the first time in months. We stayed there a moment, the chapel behind us, the world ahead. My mother joined us, her steps slow but sure, and we walked to the car, Victor's driver waiting, a familiar face in this new chapter. I helped Victor in, folding the wheelchair with a practiced ease, the daisies tucked into his coat pocket. My mother slid into the back, and I took the front, the leather familiar now, not a cage but a choice. As we drove, the city lights flickered to life, a constellation of possibilities. I thought of the chandelier, its cold brilliance, its weight, and realized I didn't need it anymore. Happiness wasn't in the glitter, the money, the pride. It was here, in the quiet between us, in the forgiveness we'd fought for, in the family we'd stitched from broken threads. My mother's hand rested on my shoulder, Victor's breath a steady rhythm beside me, and I knew we weren't done. Not with Hale, not with the ghosts. But we were enough for now. I didn't know what tomorrow held. The scandal lingered. Hale's shadow loomed and Victor's empire was still a wreck. But as the car rolled through the dusk, I felt it. A light beyond the storm, faint but growing. We'd face it, not as pawns or prisoners, but as something stronger. I glanced at Victor, his eyes catching mine, and smiled. Today, we had each other. Tomorrow could wait. If you've been swept away by this journey of love, sacrifice, and redemption, don't forget to hit that like button. It means the world to me. And if you want more stories that tug at your heart and lift your spirit, subscribe now and join our little family. Let's keep the inspiration flowing. See you in the next one.